Ido, thank you for that introduction, that super generous introduction. I've had the privilege of knowing you many, many years now. Neither of us have aged visibly, though, in those years. And Ido is truly a great friend and a great thinker. You're definitely privileged to be here in this forum that Ido has curated like a maestro. So thank you. So what am I doing here talking about faith? I'm a banker. You know, I look like, I'm just another banker in a suit. And I should be thinking about finance. I should be thinking about making loans. I should be thinking about a lot of other things. And yet, as Ido mentioned, for the last 5 years, I basically was OCD writing a book about faith. And the reason I wrote this book, and the reason why I basically became a monk during the writing of this book, just focused on my family, work, and I also drank wine. But other than that, I really didn't do anything, is because I think that we're missing a fundamental part of an important discussion in our society that is so fundamental. It's fundamental to diplomacy. It's fundamental to finance. It's fundamental to our politics. And we're losing touch with it. And it comes from one of the oldest sources that we have, which is the Bible. How many people here own a Bible? How many people here have opened up that Bible in the last month? Okay. Not too many. Some, good for you, but not too many. And so what I'm going to argue is that actually we have a lot to learn from the Bible in this sense. The Bible was a revolutionary document. And it basically came for an important purpose that was to have an immense impact on humanity, and a lesson that we've unfortunately forgotten, which is it came to overturn idolatry. Now, we normally think of idolatry, it's the bowing down to statues. I don't know, this isn't a Greek column, it's a faux Greek column, but the Greeks had statues to the gods, we will bow down to them, they worship them. Oh, that was very nice, we're so over that it doesn't matter. But what I'm going to argue to you is a truth that I think will inform everything you learn today and everything, and frankly, a lot of things that you'll see in society, which is, what does the Bible really define idolatry as? Idolatry is a set of lies about power. It's about ascribing superpowers or super authority to finite beings, people, ideologies, or natural processes. In the old days, animals, not so much anymore, but the other items, absolutely. So we may have thought that we licked the God King Pharaoh 3,800 years ago. We're about to come to Passover. We're about to come to Easter. All have the Passover story is central to them. In a month, we're about to have Ramadan, less than a month. Ramadan appearing in the Quran. It's not really well known, but Moses is mentioned. He's a key figure. He's mentioned 137 times in the Quran. So Moses and the monotheistic revolution that the Bible brought was critical. And yet, we didn't lick idolatry. We didn't lick this at all. The whole 20th century was a catalog of God-king idolaters. Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, Hitler, the Kim family, the Assad family. I could go on and on and on. How did Stalin allow or get away with sending tens of millions to the Gulag, starving a quarter of the Ukraine, killing every kulak, and projecting his face into the sky through the Soviet Space Agency? How did Mao convinced 30 million of his comrades to march to their death in the Great March? And then he was responsible for killing another, at least 30 million. We'll never know how many in the Cultural Revolution. And people accepted their authority. Nobody questioned that Stalin or Hitler or any other, or that Mao or Pol Pot had the right to kill a quarter of his population. Nobody questioned it. because we believed lies about power. We believed that people had authority, supernatural authority, superpower that was their own, that didn't come from an all-good source. And you know, those are macro examples. Those are examples in which over 100 million people were murdered just in the 20th century. But let me bring it down to even a micro example, one that we've been talking about heavily over the last 18 months. And that is folks like Harvey Weinstein, Eric Schneiderman, Charlie Rose, and I could go on and on and on. You couldn't question a Charlie Rose at CBS. You couldn't question him. His authority was unquestioned and unquestionable. If you questioned Charlie Rose, your career was over. You would be shunted aside. You would be not able to go forward. Same thing with, obviously, Harvey Weinstein. He could make and break careers. He had that authority. He was an idol. They were all idols, unquestioned idols. People accepted their authority. People accepted their deification. And that's what I'm going to argue, and I'd like to argue why this is a theory of everything. Because this notion of having faith in idols is something that unfortunately has infected our society and infected the world. Now, let me talk about the difference. I titled my book, In Good Faith. Let me talk for a moment about the difference between good faith and bad faith. And by the way, and Ido touched on this, you can be, I don't care if you're a secularist, if you don't believe in God. Some of the blurbs that I had in the book were from atheists, profound atheists, but we can still have a discussion in good faith and you'll get to understand what this is. And also, you can be a believer and be an idolatrous believer. I don't want to have anything to do with you. So let's talk about what the difference between good faith and bad faith is. And then when we go further, we'll talk about how we can apply that to finance and to society and to a whole bunch of other paradigms, and we can unpack that. So here's what good faith is. There's no proof of anything. There's no proof of anything in the world. We've learned that, in a sense, from quantum mechanics. Everything is essentially a probability. Everything that we know, everything that we see, everything that we touch, everything is a belief, an assumption in a certain kind of way. So almost everything is faith. Everything that we know is faith. Taking our country, the building of our society, whatever you think of, we take essentially to some degree on faith. So good faith is believing in something with good evidence. In other words, there's a reason to believe in that. There's a truthful reason to believe in that. Bad faith is believing in things that aren't truthful, don't have evidence, don't have authority. And unfortunately, we are too quick to believe in things that we want to believe in, but don't necessarily have good evidence or good authority, or we don't want to spend the time thinking about whether there's good evidence or good authority. It's one of many lessons of the Bible, because we want to believe the fables of our God King, of our ideology, whatever our idolatry is that we are subscribing to. We have to always take the time to go and look at the truth. Again, we're coming up to the holiday of Passover. I'm going to give you one story, one little snippet from the Passover story. Moses, everybody I hope knows this story, this part of the story. Moses, this is before Moses actually. Pharaoh decrees what? That every Hebrew child should be, every Israelite boy, I'm sorry, not child, not every child, but every boy, should be killed. So he calls in the Egyptian midwives, and he says to them, when you're delivering the Israelite babies, if it's a boy, kill it. If it's a girl, let it live. That's all he says. And then the Egyptian midwives, being God-fearing, if you will, being two women who are amazingly heroic, who recognize that this is truly evil, they don't do it. But because they live in an idolatrous society, they can't actually tell Pharaoh the truth. So when Pharaoh calls to them and says, what's going on? The Israelite baby boys are living. My sources tell me this. My listeners, my informants tell me this. They say, and the Hebrew is even more instructive than the English here in terms of the translation. They say the Israelite women give birth like animals. They use the term chayot, which could mean giving birth, but means animals in Hebrew. And so we can't get to them in time. They just give birth and they don't need midwives. Now, the amazing thing is, Pharaoh accepts it. He believes them. He doesn't recognize, he doesn't even take the time to understand his own set of lies in his mind, that he has taken the Israelites and so demonized and delegitimized them that he thinks they're animals, they're vermin, that he believes that Israelite women aren't really human, they don't give birth like other humans. So he believes them. He actually hurts himself in that sense by believing his own lies. But the interesting thing is, the Egyptian women, the Egyptian midwives, know how to play into that. They know how to play into prejudice. And they know that in an idolatrous society, unfortunately, telling the truth, not like the other person, but thinking that they're evil, not being able to get into their mindset, and I don't care which political party you're from, if you can't talk to the other, we're in serious problems. When I was working on Wall Street, and this is what really, in a way, started the idea for the book many, many years ago, before I thought I was actually going to write a book. I got to meet a lot of people on Wall Street, one of whom I talk about in the book, without a name. But very commonly, the thought would be from a trader or from someone else I would talk to that they wanted to make a lot of money. And that really was the thing that they wanted to do because it was important to them, because it would allow them to have power, and they would benefit their family. And unfortunately, we've seen, what that is about too, even in this recent college entry scandal, that money means power. By the way, I just want to clear one thing up. People don't ever deify money itself. They deify themselves, and just like Pharaoh, who had armies, in today's world, money is our source of power. They utilize money to promote their own power. So one person who I'm visualizing in my mind, he would tell me that his goal was to simply amass as much money as possible, as much money as possible, power as he could, and whatever he had to do was okay, as long as he didn't get caught. In other words, he loved really detailed regulation because he could follow those regulations, figure out a way to circumnavigate those regulations, and do whatever he wanted, and it would be legal. I mean, he didn't actually want to, and I don't think most people want to break the law because there are consequences. It's not because it's immoral, but they don't want to face the consequences. So if they can avoid that, they do. And so if he had to step on someone, it was pure Machiavellian. Machiavelli said, if you go after, either bring as patrons people who are more powerful than you, or crush them. And he would, be cheerfully happy to do either one. And in the whole 2008 crisis, I argue that the real core problem in the mortgage crisis and the financial crisis was a crisis of trust. And that's why we haven't fully recovered from it. We used to sort of have some business trust in the United States where you could trust someone's handshake, you could trust the goodness of the counterparty. But now, not so much. That's why underwriters put all sorts of things into mortgage portfolio, mortgage securities that they shouldn't have put in, they knew better. I know I've talked to traders who just waved in mortgages that weren't really underwritten. Everybody filled out the form, but nobody bothered to check the truth of whether or not people actually had that income. People actually lived in that house. I looked at one file myself. I think there was one person said they had owned, in separate files, they had claimed to own 7 different houses as their primary residence. Nobody bothered because you know what? We could just put this mortgage in a MBS, sell it, we're fine. And by the way, that doesn't relinquish the person on the other side. You know, the so-called liar's loans. People just signed that saying I owned, you know, each of those 7 houses was the primary residence. So it is a core belief that I think can revolutionize our society if we go back to good faith. If we go back to recognizing and calling out idolatry, and if we calling out idolatry, and do everything in our power to combat it. And again, I don't care whether you're a believer or a non-believer. I care whether or not you'll follow that golden rule. That golden rule means you follow it when you cross the street. It means when you hire someone. It means when you fill out a mortgage application. It means when you approve a mortgage application. Anytime you have any interaction with another person, if you follow that golden rule, you're going to be on the first path toward improving the world and making it safe for the new diplomacy. Thank you.
We have time for a couple of questions.
Yes, theory number questions. Do you want to call on people or would you like me to? I'm happy to.
Please, Joel.
Thank you. I think that your thesis might actually be broader than you make it, and I wonder how you would deal with that. I don't know if you're familiar with the Milgram studies.
Yes.
Okay, so what they showed basically is anyone, don't have to be an idol, don't have to be charismatic, don't have to have actual power. Apparently you referenced it.
Yeah.
Anybody who just appears to be an authority and tells you to do something, you'll do such extreme things that shock a person to death. So it doesn't have to be an idol, it just has to be anyone, and we're kind of built that way to follow. So I'm wondering if that makes things tougher than what it sounded like.
Ooh, sorry. So first of all, I talk about the Milgram study. Here's a photo of the person sitting right next to a person that they're shocking, presumably, and this person, by the way, was informed that the other person had a heart ailment, still did it because he was told to do so. Pretty amazing. This is still going on. People do it, and I deal with this this is the Jim Jones. People drank the Kool-Aid because Jim Jones told them to. And by the way, people don't think that anybody bows down to idols. Here's Kim Jong-un and his father, and people, if you see in North Korea, are bowing down to him. 40,000 statues of the Kim family members are found in North Korea. So my point is that yes, and I deal with this in a broader way in the book, is that we crave, I started to say this a little, we crave believing in authority. It seems to be our natural default mode as human beings. And that's why the Bible was so revolutionary of a document, because it says, think for yourself, you have your own responsibility, you have your own, mantle of moral leadership that you have to take. And so I do think that's why I call it a theory of everything.
All right, I think we'll let one of the students ask a question, please.
I'm not a student, but thank you. So I'm a Christian, and I believe the Bible has done a lot of things for Christianity. I also believe that it was formed to make a more civilized society. Meaning, homosexuality was rampant at that time, I believe.
I'm sorry?
Homosexuality was rampant at that time the Bible was created. And I think that was created to stop idolatry, all those negative things. And I think the Bible has affected that till today. Homosexuality is not accepted and stuff like that. I also was curious. You mentioned a version of Moses, and I don't recall that from the Bible I've read. Did you get that?
The Quran. He's mentioned 137 times.
Okay, no, because you said something about. I thought that all the male children did die except for Moses. That's why you said.
Yeah, that's this is the earlier story. If you go and reread chapters 1 and 2 of Exodus, and you'll get this story, because I think you're putting them in a little different order. First with the Egyptian midwives, later the Egyptians were told to throw the babies into the sea. But I also want to say, and I don't think my personal view is different on homosexuality. I don't think that the Bible says exactly as you are mentioning it. I think there are two points in the Hebrew Scriptures that deal with homosexuality, but what they deal with is something specific. The Bible regulates, the Hebrew Scriptures regulate to a certain degree everything about people. It regulates time. There's the Shabbat. It regulates our interpersonal, all sorts of interpersonal interactions. It regulates sex so that, according to the Bible, men and women who are married aren't supposed to have intercourse during the woman's menstrual cycle. And in my view, it also regulates homosexual sex. If you read the two lines, it's actually pretty clear in the Hebrew. What is forbidden is anal sex between two men. That's what it says. I mean, we could have a long conversation, but that's literally what it says. It doesn't forbid homosexuality in general, but it does forbid those, and it does it in two different places. So that's a long conversation. I heartily recommend Rabbi Stephen Greenberg's book, Wrestling with God is the name. Excellent book. He really delves into the view of the Bible and homosexuality.
All right, I know that there's so many other people that would.
Maybe
like
we
to
should ask a number of them together, and then I'll try to, let everybody ask
All
questions.
right, I just want to stay on time, so yeah, we have 3 more minutes before I have to introduce our next speaker. So why don't we take all the 3 questions that we have together, and then Scott will try to answer them.
Okay, so back to what you were talking about. Did you come up with a conclusion? If our instinct is to follow an idolater, what is your conclusion about anarchists or rebels or people who are willing to speak truth to power? They suffer consequences. How do we move toward a situation where you can speak truth to those who have self-deified?
So, yeah.
Apparently, one of the elements of good faith is doing your own research and coming to your own conclusion. But in today's world, with the internet and the World Wide Web and all of this information that isn't curated, and phrases into our lexicon, phrases like alternative facts, and there's so many beings, so many intelligent people who adopt different viewpoints based on alternative views of reality,
Right.
which are mutually exclusive. How do you get to good faith?
Got it. Go. Oh, too quickly though. Yeah. Before Ito gets the hook out for me.
You refer to circumventing regulations. Isn't that also the realm of focusing on following the letter of the law,
Yes.
not the spirit of the law? And in so doing, are we also avoiding the golden rule?
Mm-hmm. And last.
And my question is just, you referenced a number of infamous despots. How do you characterize?
I'm sorry, I can't.
A number of despots that you referenced. And how do you characterize Lincoln and Churchill and Mandela and Gandhi, right, in terms of faith?
Okay. So first of all, I'm going to try to be really succinct. Oh, one more.
Your very quick question.
Yes.
If everything in this world has been created by God, then isn't it that God has given powers to some people and power to, and wisdom or not wisdom to follow those leaders who have power? So isn't everything created by God?
Okay. I'm going to try to do this real quick. I might go a moment or so over, but I won't go a lot over. So first of all, the Bible says there is no guarantee that doing the right thing and speaking truth to power will be successful. When Moses saves the Israelite from being beaten to death, What is his reward? He's banished to Midian for 40 years. He goes from being a prince of Egypt to wearing the same shoes covered with manure as a sheep farmer or a shepherd. So there's no guarantee. And nobody knows, he doesn't know he's coming back. The only time that he gets the call is when at the end of chapter 2, all of the Israelites call out to God. In other words, finally they recognize that we need to take some collective action. They need a leader, and God provides that leader. That's a really short summary of a really long story. But speaking truth to power has to be something we need to do, but it's not always going to be the right thing. And the Egyptian midwives knew if they really spoke truth to power, they'd be executed. So they figured out a circumnavigation of that. Okay, the next question related to alternative facts and true facts and the like. And I deal with that. That's a much more complicated and longer answer. I actually talk and use the example of Korach, who I think was the first person to use alternative facts, and tried to overturn the Moses' monotheistic revolution by making himself the sole spokesperson for God. We talked about the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, and clearly, if the Bible says anything, it says you got to work on the spirit and not the letter. I mean, even prophets on occasion circumvent the law because there's a need to do that, and the judges and the like are given the right to do that. And in terms of differentiating between good leaders and bad leaders, the Mandelas of the world, I talk about in a little bit in the book. I had a searing experience where on a visit to South Africa, where I visited Robben's Island and stood in the cell of Nelson Mandela that was no bigger than this little podium area. And even with the cell door open, I felt claustrophobic. And yet here is someone who, we talked about, will speaking truth to power work? No, but he, in the short term, he suffered. I can't even imagine being in that cell and the beatings they took. I talk about Toulouse, who is another, I can't go into it, another hero. What they suffered because they spoke truth to power was much more than what anything we're imagining. No protest rally where you're taken to the county jail for 3 days. Mandela spent his adult life in jail, in prison, being beaten. And yet he spoke truth to power, and ultimately, just like Moses, the people cried out. There was enough both whites and blacks who came to recognize what truth and what the golden rule was. In all candor, South Africa probably, without a Mandela, without, frankly, a few white leaders at the time, would have been a bloodbath. So I do think that he was a very successful leader, and I do think he took the right path. But it wasn't to immediately engage in bloodshed. It was to do other things. So the questions are good, and they indicate that you're listening because this is the idea of idolatry, and the idea of overcoming idolatry is huge. And it's not easy. It's hard work, but I commend it to you all. And if we do that, we'll be in a much better place. Thank you.
So much.